Hello there, welcome to Timebreaker Podcast.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about our experiences and the state of Star Wars.
I'm your host, Daniel.
And this is Anthony.
And let's get right into it. So, what was your first Star Wars experience?
So, for me, I was so young. I was born in 2000. So, by the time episode 3 was coming out, I was only 4. And for me, my first vivid memory of going to a Star Wars movie was when I was 4. And we saw it on opening day. But my dad had actually went and saw it opening night so that he could make sure it was appropriate for a 4-year-old. And obviously there's some things in there that aren't so appropriate.
You don't like seeing that Burning Man?
It took me 2 years before I was finally allowed to actually see the movie all the way through. Mace Windu getting his hand chopped off and Anakin bursting in the flames. My dad was just that's a no-go. You are not allowed to see this yet. And it took a lot of convincing. I'm ready, Dad. I'm 5 years old. I can see it. I can take it. But for me, I had been shown the original trilogy, but I don't vividly remember seeing them. I knew what Star Wars was, and I was super excited for episode 3, but I don't have a vivid memory of seeing them.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same way. I remember I think at least I remember going to my cousin's house, and he was a big Star Wars fan, and so I'd watch all the movies over there, so I knew the overall story of it. But I think just because of how advanced the saber fights were in episode 3, that was probably the one I watched the most. So that's where my idea of Star Wars was morphed around. So that's why, because I was around the right age demographic for when Clone Wars first came out. So I and those were the characters I was already super hyped with. I liked Anakin, I liked Obi-Wan, those are my dudes. So then the Clone Wars movie came out. I didn't watch it in theaters, but I think my dad got it for me on DVD, so I watched it, and that was right before, because the movie was basically made to advertise the series that was coming out. So I watched the movie. I thought the movie was great as a kid. I look back at it now and I realize it's a kind of ass, but
I will agree with that.
But it got me hooked on this show, and so I was there every week watching that show, and that was my Star Wars.
You know what? Surprisingly, I actually saw the Star Wars Clone Wars movie in the theaters, and I remember walking out. It was okay. Even as an 8-year-old, I was entertained, but I wasn't. I remember having a different feeling walking out of Revenge of the Sith, and so I was definitely feeling not I was I don't even know, I was so confused by what I had seen, because my dad really hadn't he's we're going to go and see Star Wars, and and then it started. I'm this isn't the Star Wars I know.
Right. It's animated.
This was long before I feel I wasn't attached to the TV, and so I really had no idea what was going on. I didn't know this was coming, and so after seeing that, I really didn't need to see the show, and I know that my family decided to watch it, but I never got into it. And actually, it took me years before I finally sat down to watch it.
Yeah, and I think to me too, what also made me so intrigued to watch the show is once I saw the movie and they introduced Ahsoka and Anakin having a Padawan. I was oh, but he doesn't have a Padawan in episode 3, so I was what's that all about?
See, and I think for me, for really not knowing what was going on, I think that was why I couldn't hook myself to it, because I thought it was, I was so young, I couldn't understand what that meant, and so I'm just is this just some spin-off, some alternative future or something? Right. Because obviously, things weren't matching up to what I'd seen in episode 3.
Who's this Rex guy?
But going back to what you were saying about how you were introduced to Star Wars, I feel I was introduced the exact same way, because my dad had, he had Star Wars merchandise around the house. He owned the original Star Wars trilogy on DVD, and later, I think when I was 9 or 10, he finally he was clearing out his closet, and he showed me his VHS copies. Oh, gosh. And he was this right here, and I'm oh, this right here. He's the widescreen special edition. And I'm ooh. And so this was my first exploration in the film, because I was what's widescreen? And he's well, if you cut the bars and you zoom it in, that's what full screen is, and you're losing image. And if it's widescreen, you're getting the original image. And I was oh, and my whole life was changed. And after that, I would always ask for Christmas and my birthday, I want it in widescreen.
It's a spirit format. So you saw your first one you saw was episode 3 in the theater. As surprising, like, for me being such a big Star Wars fan, like, the first one I saw in theaters was actually Force Awakens. I guess my family, we weren't super big into going to the theaters, especially when we were kids, because I guess they just didn't want the hassle of taking me and my sister to the theater. So yeah, I didn't go till Force Awakens, and when Force Awakens came out, that was like a theatrical experience for everybody.
Oh, absolutely! It was the thing. Like it's not like now 6 years later,
right.
We don't see it as what it was then. But I mean, this was the first Star Wars in 10 years, and not only that, but
it was supposed to be like a return to form,
right? And when the prequels came out, people weren't in love with them. And so this was like a second chance at it for some, even though at the same time Force Awakens was coming out, the prequels were starting to actually become more accepted by the community. And so like it was massive. Like, and again, we've had Endgame since, which has shown that you can be big, but you can get bigger. And
right.
Like, it's insane thinking that at the time, the biggest grossing movie in December had been Avatar. And then Star Wars just came in and wiped it.
Yeah. Like, it was so big, like, there's, like, so many people, like, in our high school that were, like, strictly not Star Wars fans, but they still watched it because, like, that was, like, the thing to do.
Oh, yeah. I heard it all the time. Like, they'd be like, I once saw The Force Awakens. I'd be like, oh, so you saw the other ones, right? Yeah. And they'd be like, oh, no, my family dragged me to The Force Awakens. So it was fine. I didn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I felt was, like, really well-kept secret was Han Solo's death in The Force Awakens.
For the most part, yeah.
Like, going into school, like, I expected spoilers to be going off because of the fact that people had seen it already. But, like, I didn't start seeing people talk about it normally, like, out in the public until probably around the time it came out on Blu-ray in April of the next year.
Huh.
And, like, especially in a age and day with social media, like, I was shocked that I had never seen it got spoiled elsewhere.
It's impossible. Yeah. So, I think going into, like, that leads into, like, where Star Wars is going now, or, like, kind of, like, the state of Star Wars now, especially with the acquisition from Disney. So that was, like, their big, like, that was, like, the first thing Disney put out. I mean, they put out, like, Rebels before that.
They technically put out Rebels.
Yeah.
I believe that Rebels, I think the thought of Rebels, I think, had already been around, and then it just kind of got shifted over to Disney when the acquisition happened.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really count that so much as anything. Like, so Force Awakens was really, like, the first big thing that Disney was putting out, and I think it was generally, like, really positive of a reception, and, like, everybody loved what Disney was doing with Star Wars after Force Awakens. I mean, you got, like, the criticisms of, like, it was like a New Hope remake, but I mean, like, you kind of had to.
See, for me, I don't understand an issue with that, because we see remakes all the time, and they're well received every once in a while. And the critique has never been that it's identical. The critique typically ends up being that they change too much. So for the one time they choose to not go too far. I mean, again, what Disney, I think, was trying to do was they were trying to pull in old fans and new fans to merge into one and start liking Star Wars again, because there hadn't been a movie in 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think in hindsight, a lot of people would have preferred that George Lucas had done the trilogy rather than sell it.
Maybe, yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, you can't change that aspect of it.
Right. And I mean, Force Awakens introduced a lot of, like, I think it introduced a decent amount of cool elements to the franchise. I mean, like, Kylo Ren, for one, I think is the best part of the entire trilogy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think they utilized, like, the legacy characters. I mean, like, I think Han's really good in the movie, too.
Right, and for me personally, my issue when it came to later films wasn't the characters per se. It was more choices that were made in the development of these films of where to take them that I didn't like as much. It wasn't the actual characters, though, that bothered me so much.
Right, and I think at first with The Force Awakens, like, it was hard to tell that there wasn't a direction for all three because we only had one to go off of. So we didn't know, like, where it was going to go or if they knew where it was going to go.
And right, sitting here 2 years after almost from Rise of Skywalker, I think having a plan and finding directors that would have went with that plan while making their own impact with their directing skills and the way it's presented would have been a better format than just pretty much throwing it out and going, hey, any director can do whatever they want.
Yeah, I think we would have gotten away.
But also, having seen aspects of what we could have gotten as our closing chapter to Trilogy, it's hard to see why they scrapped it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that Rise of Skywalker is necessarily the worst film I've ever seen, but it definitely, I mean, it just feels tacked on at the end. It feels like it was trying to cover what they wanted to do after The Force Awakens, but having to deal with the choices that were made in The Last Jedi. And I think a lot of people have an issue with that because retconning is something that a lot of people just don't enjoy.
Yeah, it's just unnecessary. And yeah, the trilogy as a whole would have really benefited from an overall like direction or plan. But so they started off with Force Awakens and they were doing really good, and then I feel like, and then they dropped Rogue One, which I still think like people arguably love that one more, and that's some people's like favorite Star Wars movie. So like Disney was like doing great after Rogue One.
Well, right, but there's also this misunderstanding about Rogue One, and it's the fact that if you go and watch those trailers, which Disney's never pulled, so they're still available, there's obviously a whole different final act in that movie that they just completely changed between April of 2016 and by the time it came out in December.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some stuff going on with Gareth Edwards and up top, but...
And I think this whole idea of Star Wars has fallen, I don't think it's that the actual brand itself has fallen, but the direction it's going has just been so... Like, it's just been a jumbled bag ever since...
Yeah, they haven't had, like, a clear...
Like, and I feel like we did originally have a clear vision. You know, we had J.J. Abrams doing The Force Awakens. We had Rian Johnson touching Episode 8. We had Colin Trevorrow going to Episode 9. And then we had 2 spin-off movies in 2016 and 2018 with Gareth Edwards, who did Godzilla, which, I mean...
I thought it was a pretty solid movie.
For me, when I first heard that, I was excited because he had done Godzilla, like, scaled him so well. Like, he felt massive when you went and saw that movie. And
or
so
even,
I was...
like, earlier in the trailers, like, when they show, like, that shot of, like, the Star Destroyer next to, like, the Death Star, it's, like, such a cool shot because you see how, like, big that thing is.
Right, and so, like, for me, that was why I was so excited for him to touch a movie that took place during the Galactic Empire era. And so, and then when they announced that, because at the time we didn't really have a clear idea of what the second spin-off movie was going to be, we just knew that it was the directors of 21 and 22 Jump Street. And so I was fairly excited.
Yeah.
And then when it was a Han Solo movie, I mean, again, it's not that I was disinterested, but I was definitely curious.
Yeah, I was like, interesting choice. I mean, I'll see it, but like, why is
it
this?
I think out of all of the movies Disney released, I mean, I think Solo, 1, is the most underappreciated, but 2, I think it's just, it got the worst hand in it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, it got a director change practically towards the end of production. I mean,
they basically had to reshoot the entire movie.
Right. Like, they had almost shot it all. They were, I think, reports were saying 90% done with the film when they fired them and hired a new director on. And at the same time, it was coming off of The Last Jedi, which... I would say, some will say they absolutely hate it. I think it just had mixed response.
Definitely divided the fan base.
But you were coming off that. It was coming, I mean, Last Jedi came out on Blu-ray literally at the end of March, and this movie came out at the end of May, and it wasn't even like, we got our first trailer over Super Bowl that year. Like, it had no advertising time. It was coming out right after Infinity War, and it came out right after Deadpool. I mean, it really just, it had a really bad release date. And I think a lot of people just don't even look at that as an aspect because it's a Star Wars movie, but it's a Star Wars movie that went back to May and had not been released in May since 2005.
And was a non-episodic film.
Right. Well, but the counter argument to this is that Rogue One was not an episode film, and it made over $1 billion.
But it also came out in December.
Right, and that's where I'm saying where had Disney delayed it to December, how much better it would have performed. I mean, just look at Bumblebee, which came out that same year. Made more than it, and like
wasn't that during like the December that we thought like was going to be like Battle Royale?
Right, we thought it was going to be Battle Royale, and I don't recall what movies had been positioned there that we thought that.
Is that Aquaman there?
Aquaman came out that year. So did Bumblebee. But I think a major player moved out of it.
Yeah, so I think Disney was just too afraid to
They
go
had
in
Mary
that window.
Poppins released that December, actually. And for me, I think, considering the way Mary Poppins did financially, I think Disney could have moved Mary Poppins into the spring and had Star Wars come out that December.
Mary Poppins totally for sure is a Disney Plus movie right now in COVID times.
Yeah.
So Last Jedi came out, and that really, like, there's some aspects I really like, some aspects I really don't like. Yeah, Throne Room seems really dope. But I think just like for the overall fan base, it really just kind of hurt everybody. Cause
I think for me, there was 3 major issues with that movie, and the first one was definitely just the way it ended. It didn't feel like the second chapter in the trilogy. It tied things up way too nicely to like be able to pretty much pull yourself out of it.
Yeah, I think if you look at that, the way the Last Jedi ends versus the way Empire ends, like Empire is like a really hard cliffhanger. Like they lose Han, and you're like, what are they gonna do now?
Right, but they didn't lose anything at the end. The only thing is that Kylo Ren's in charge, but we had already been experiencing that for probably the last 30 minutes in the movie since Snoke died.
Yeah,
and so it felt off for me.
Yeah. And then we didn't know, like, if Broom Boy was just a symbol or if he was going to be, like, that's where the next one was going.
Right, and people still talk about Broom Boy, and the fact of it is that where Rian Johnson's supposed trilogy that still to this day has not been canceled is going.
Yeah.
But for me, then, my second issue was Crate. Or not Crate, the Casino Planet.
Oh.
Not Crate, my bad.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even...
But I don't remember what the Casino Planet's called. But that whole plot line, for me, just... It served no purpose.
Yeah.
Also, Finn getting onto, the giant Star Destroyer. I mean, it just... There was no reason for it because at the end of the day, they did nothing. Their plan went out the door, and I felt like my time had been wasted during that whole plot thread.
Or even like when they were going to kill Finn. I thought that would have been a pretty good death for Finn.
Right, and I was going to say that as my third reason. Just, I didn't feel like... I feel like they performed Finn's supposed death perfectly. I mean, his purpose was to take down the Empire. That was what his character arc was. And honestly, he should have died when Kylo Ren slashed him in The Force Awakens. And so for me, him sacrificing himself to take out the Empire or the First Order would have been a fitting death. But instead, it wasn't that they did it. It was just the reason they did it. Just, I didn't like it.
And then they kept him alive, and I feel like he wasn't really a contributing member from then on out. Like, at least, like, story-wise, he didn't have a whole lot to do in Rise of Skywalker, I felt like. Aside from the teasing stuff.
Right, and whose fault is that, though? I feel like that's just the direction Disney went with this, is he was underutilized, and so if he had died in The Last Jedi, sadly, like, I feel like everyone would have moved on, because he was so underused in the 2 movies up to that point.
And I think he's on board with that, too, because John Boyega has been very vocal about his...
Yeah, he is
dislike towards how
he's vocally said that he hopes no one else gets treated like that at Disney.
Yeah.
And it's such a bummer, because, like, he had the potential. I mean, he was a stormtrooper in the First Order that went rogue. Like, there was so much potential. It was a cool take. And I feel like they just underutilized him.
Yeah, I really wanted to see, like, where they were going to go with that storyline, but it just didn't really pan out.
But for me, the one complaint that people always make about the movie, and it's Luke Skywalker. Every time they complain about that movie, they talk about how much they didn't like the direction they took with Luke. And for me, I'm personally okay with it. Because something had to have happened for him to pretty much bail.
Yeah.
And people's excuses is that, he wouldn't have done that. Well, other Jedi have abandoned before, so how hard is it to see? Luke is not a flawless character, and we saw that over the original trilogy. He made mistakes. He almost killed Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, the good in him stopped him from doing it, but he was about to do it. So, this idea that he was a flawless character, I feel like it's just people's misinterpretation of the character.
And, like, I think, too, everybody just wanted that fantasy or that scene of him just kicking ass and being overpowered Grandmaster Luke. But I feel like had we got that from the start, it would have been really boring because he would have just been like this Obi character who had nothing to do or no journey to go on of his own. He would just be static the entire time.
Right, the whole journey of Luke's character in The Last Jedi is pretty much pulling himself out of this deep, almost depression that he's put himself in because of the fact that he's to blame for the new Jedi Order falling and for Kylo Ren turning to the dark side. And so for me, I felt it was fine.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
And it's not that The Last Jedi is the worst movie I've ever seen. I can absolutely put it on. I can sit there, I can watch it, and I'll, at the end, go, not my favorite, but it's entertaining. And it passes time.
Yeah.
The same can be said about The Rise of Skywalker. It's not perfect. It's nowhere near perfect, but I'm entertained by it. It does an entertaining job.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about Solo 2, which was their next movie. And, I mean, I think the thing that gets to me about Solo the most is just how, like, unnecessary the movie is.
Right. It served no purpose.
Right. Like, it literally contributes nothing to the canon.
But I feel like it was going to.
Yeah. Well, I would assume...
With its sequels, it would have...
Yeah, and I there's rumors that they might explore, like, that side in, like, TV show or animation or other things, but...
I would say the Lando series is the best chance that it has to jump off that point. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm all for showing the legacy characters, but at this point, just look at what happened with Harrison Ford just a few weeks ago with his injury. I mean, these actors are getting older, and you risk them getting injured, delaying production, and I think that Donald Glover is a really good Lando.
Yeah.
And I didn't think the guy that played Han Solo was that bad either. I would watch another one with them, and I think the Lando show is the perfect opportunity to show that time period and what happens after Solo.
Yeah, they might incorporate that entire storyline. Who knows? But yeah, I also think what hurt Solo a lot too is the amount of rumors that we were getting about an Obi-Wan movie, and how much more people would have preferred that over a Solo.
See, I think there are so many factors going. That I feel was such a minor one. There were so many other issues going on with Solo and its production, its release, its trailers, its advertising. Like, it was a whole mess, and even trying to follow it was a disaster. I mean, you had directors leaving, you had a new director step in, you had him finish production, you had him keep the same release date, and people were worried about that. Like, how do you restart filming, keep your release date?
And all the while that's going on, the budget is just going up.
Oh, yeah, and that movie digged itself a hole. Even if it made $1 billion, I mean, Disney was still going to have to sit there at the end of the day and look at a almost $300 million movie.
You basically had to pay for 2 movies, and we're making 1. Yeah.
And so I think Solo was just doomed from the start, and I think that all came down to its release date and its budget. It just...
Yeah.
It was such a bummer. And people's excuses that it could have made money. I mean, you had Avengers Infinity War running at the time, which made over $2 billion. You had Deadpool, which came out the week before, which made over $700 million. So was there really enough room for a third movie to be making that type of money in an already crowded summer? Yeah.
And I think, too, now, it being several years later, and it's just a natural cycle for Star Wars and Star Wars fans, is us to, warm up to the movies after the fact. And that's why you think you're getting all this talk about, Solo being underrated and it being more accepted, I think, in the community nowadays.
Right, and in this outcry to remake the sequel trilogy, I think
that is so dumb.
I think it's a dishonor because we don't get a redo with Carrie Fisher. If we wipe out the sequel trilogy and decide to go back and redo it, we can't use him again. And at the same time, will Harrison Ford come back? My answer, I don't think he will. I think he liked the way his character was written out. And
that's why he came back for 9.
Right.
Because he liked what they were doing.
And for me personally, that was honestly one of my favorite scenes in Episode 9. It was so fitting, and it worked as Kylo Ren's redemption because it was the first moment that Kylo Ren really felt like he lost something, was in The Force Awakens. And I tell this people all the time, why Kylo has to keep hitting himself is because he's lost that rage that he always had. His dark side power. He's having to hit himself because he's trying to get that rage back. And it's why I feel Rey was able to defeat him on that planet. Was because he was injured. His emotions were out of balance. He was not channeling full dark side. I mean, she kind of just happened to have the upper hand, and she was angry. I feel like she channeled into the dark side because she saw what happened to Finn that made her angry.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, when I first saw that, I was like, somebody was like, I think my sister was like, is he packing in snow, like on his side? And I was like, no, I think he's just hurting himself to like feel pain to tap into the dark side.
Right, and that was my own conclusion.
Yeah, which I think was like really cool.
Right, and so talking about just Star Wars as a general, the weirdest thing that happened was, so 4K discs started coming out in like late 2015. And so everyone kind of was sitting back waiting to see what Disney was going to do with The Force Awakens. To see if it was going to come out in 4K, be Disney's first 4K. And then Disney was just like, no. Like, here's your standard Blu-ray. And so we're like, okay, maybe this is going to be like Lord of the Rings, where we're going to get another version in November. And we did. And it was for 3D Blu-ray. And it was
I thought that was so funny.
It was just so insulting. And I'm sitting there with my 4K player with no movies. And I'm just like, I just want a Star Wars movie. And then Rogue One came around. The same thing happened. I mean, Disney took so long to give us 4K
It was
on
Rise
Blu-ray.
of Skywalker. Or not Rise, it was Last Jedi. Yeah, that's what I meant. Speaking of Rise of Skywalker, that's the most recent theatrical film. And it's just coming off of Last Jedi, kind of retconning, trying to come back to what originally JJ had in mind. Like we've said with Rogue One, with Solo, just a rough production, it seemed like. Yeah.
I think that's just been Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Force Awakens and Mandalorian were the only two things that's come out of Disney's Star Wars vault, so to say, that really went through production, came out, and was able to just do what it wanted.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about just production, you want to talk about like the biggest swindle of them all is how much Kathleen Kennedy and everybody loved the production and set of Last Jedi. Remember how much they were talking about how amazing it's been working with him and how great of a thing it is?
It's such a shame because he is such a good... And it's not that audiences are like throwing him out because Knives Out came out and everyone loved it.
Oh, yeah.
So it just had to do with they didn't like the way he treated Star Wars. And that's fine. Yeah. Everyone is allowed their own opinion, but I don't think he ruined it single-handedly. No. I think that there were obviously issues, but I don't think that he killed it just because the ideas didn't necessarily work.
No, and with us moving into more newer Star Wars medium, we're kind of putting Last Jedi in the rear view mirror, and it's not really that big of a deal anymore. And like, yeah, I like Rian Johnson. I thought Knives Out was good. I love Looper.
Absolutely, Looper's amazing.
Great film.
I think I think 5 more years from now. I mean, again, it took it took a decade practically for the prequels to finally live up to what George Lucas had in mind, and
plus Clone Wars, and honestly, by that point, Rebels had started to come out too. So, I mean, it's just I don't think the Star Wars community likes change, and I think it's why people fell in love with The Mandalorian is that it touched an era of Star Wars that very familiar.
It felt familiar because it's right after Episode 6. It felt familiar. You knew where it was if you or even a casual Star Wars watcher.
And even, like, for Star Wars fans, they liked the creator and they knew what the creators were capable of, and they already liked that kind of style.
See, okay, so, getting into The Mandalorian, actually. Going into it, I was scared. Because the last movie that John had made was Lion King.
Oh, yeah.
And I was so underwhelmed of Lion King because it felt like a shot-for-shot redo of the original film.
Yet it's 40 minutes longer.
Yeah, yet it's 40 minutes longer, but I don't feel like there was 40 minutes of additional footage.
No, you didn't like looking at Pooh move?
I mean, I saw that in IMAX. It looked fantastic.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Like, visually, it was amazing.
I was emotional during the opening scene because it was cool.
but like, I don't know. Because Aladdin came out the same year, so for me it was like I looked at the two and I'm like, you know what? I don't enjoy Aladdin as much as the original, but I feel like Guy Ritchie put his mark on the film. He made it his own. He added things that he wanted to add. Where I felt like Lion King was pretty much Disney just ordered him, just remake it identical.
Yeah, and I mean, going off with like Jon Favreau's track record, I mean, like he also had Jungle Book, which I thought was really good, and he also had Iron Man 2, which is kind of but he also had Iron Man, which was really good. So like we didn't really like exactly know what we were getting with Mandalorian, but he also didn't direct any of the first season.
That is true, but and I think it was weird that they put so much emphasis that he was behind it. Like
yeah,
and again, I think if you just said that Dave Filoni was behind it, you would have had at least Clone Wars fans excited.
Yeah, but I think Clone Wars fans are kind of in tune with it enough to know that he was pretty big and like behind it.
Right. See, but what was your changing point where you went? The Mandalorian went from being pretty good to like outstanding.
I think it had to be episode 7. Episode 7 was really good. 7 and 8 were really good.
Right, the last two episodes of season 1. I agree with those options. The first time though, like the first time I went, this show is different. Like this is
3.
Right. I was gonna get to 3. Episode 3, because that was the one where he takes the child away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really, really, really good, and I was not a fan of episode 1. 2 had started to like, it started to grow on me. And then episode 3 happened, and like I was impressed. Visually, it looked stunning. The plot was amazing. Like the action sequences were really well shot. Because for me, some action sequences in movies get overshadowed because of how much movement there is. You can't clearly see what's going on, and so it just looks all blurry.
Fun fact: I'm pretty sure Deborah Chow, sorry if I miss her name, directed 3 and I think 7.
I believe so as well.
And she's also directing all of Obi-Wan.
Really? Oh, yeah.
And she's like the main showrunner person. So I'm excited for that.
Right, yeah. I was really impressed with the season finale of the first season. I was super hyped for season 2. And I was worried that
Didn't Taika do the finale of 1?
Yes.
Yeah. That was fun.
Going into season 2, it was really weird going into season 2 because by this point
I agree.
The pandemic had gone into full swing, and so it was just...
Was there any Star Wars between season 1 and 2?
There was not. Well, there was Rise of Skywalker at the end of season 1.
Right.
That had just come out. But that was... So this was the first time there was no Star Wars in December again.
Right.
And there had been no Star Wars all year long. Rise of Skywalker had come out and gotten mixed reception.
Exactly, yeah.
And so going into season 2, I definitely had a fear that they would screw this up. Like, I definitely had a fear that they would screw up season 2. Not because I was, like, I didn't trust them or anything. It was just, I felt like season 1, they got lucky. And some shows don't get so lucky when they go to the next season.
And especially because, like, season 1, like, it was good, but it wasn't, like, consistently amazing. Like, there were definitely some episode 5.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So I didn't know if, like, was I going to get more episode 5 in season 2, or was it going to be more like episode 3 in season 2? And I definitely feel like season 2, I think, was better, but it still wasn't perfect.
No, absolutely not. But season 2, I think, it's like Rogue One. So Rogue One, if you took out the third act, and it wasn't that, and it was something else, and it wasn't as good, I don't think Rogue One would have been as well remembered as it is today. But
I'll go even further than that. I think you take away that one scene in Rogue One, it's not as well remembered as it is today.
Okay, going into that scene.
It's a great scene.
I remember sitting down in the theater.
So amazing.
Not expecting, because, Darth Vader was in the movie, but I wasn't expecting. Right, and I was just expecting him to be kind of standing there doing nothing. Yeah. And
he's like, prepare a boarding party. I was like,
and when that scene happened, I didn't even have to look at everyone else in the theater.
No,
like, I just knew that everyone else in the theater had the exact same reaction I was having, that, oh my gosh, this is this is it. This is like the scene for Darth Vader that we're gonna get. And
you heard the breathing, and literally my entire theater lit up with lightsabers.
You got a much better experience than I do. But I just, you could feel like the vibe in the air that like...
It was so quiet.
Right. And it was just... That was the one thing everyone was talking about afterwards.
100%.
Not only that, but I really appreciate that they killed the characters. I know that there's some people who felt that they were underused, but for me, these were characters that were never in the original trilogy. So it was going to be hard to see them live through this, and I've never seen them since.
Yeah.
So... in that sense, I was glad that they died.
Yeah. Okay, so why is season 2 like Rogue One?
So season 2 is like Rogue One, in my opinion, because of that one scene. Because of that one character that shows up. Because
that's very
Luke
reminiscent
Skywalker,
of the exact same scene.
Right. Because Luke Skywalker shows up, I think season 2 went from being really, really good, amazing, fantastic, to just... nothing we've ever seen before. All in just one scene, because almost no one knew it was coming. That
was like a really good Star Wars sequel.
I had guessed pretty early on that was who Grogu was talking to, because I'm like,
because we already saw
because we'd already seen Ahsoka, and I feel like the episodes were out of order because of that. I feel like if that had happened before we met Ahsoka, it could have been Ahsoka, but because she didn't go with, it had to be someone else. And I know that the second option, which I was also... So either option, Luke Skywalker, I was okay with.
Who was the second option? Was it Cal?
Cal from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was who they were thinking might be who he was calling. And I think that one also would have been really cool, only because you would have had a video game that is canon go into... the live-action Star Wars universe.
The actor is the same. Looks exact.
Oh, yeah,
they
absolutely.
use exactly him.
But again, you're talking about, we're talking another 15 years after Fallen Order, so it might have been
I know,
a
but you
different
can age him up a little bit. But I think that if they went that route, not as many people would know who that was.
Right, because I played Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, but you still have not.
I know the basic story of it, and then I also, just let's be real here. Like, who would have had a bigger impact, Luke Skywalker or Cal?
Oh, absolutely. Luke Skywalker has the bigger impact. My question was... were they really going to go this route?
Yeah, I didn't know if they were going to have the balls to do it.
Even now I'm sitting here, you pulled, and I feel like season 3 is going to be affected because of this. You pulled such a big, you had the rug, and you didn't just yank it, you burned it. You burned whatever thread was leading to the next season.
You played your best hand already.
Obviously, we're going to deal with the Darksaber in the next season, but...
I think we're going back to Mandalore.
But... Grogu has now went off with Luke. So either we're doing a time jump or this show is going to have to learn what it is without Grogu. And I think Grogu has been the foundation of this show. It's been the selling point. Yeah, absolutely. Show. I mean, just look at merchandise.
Oh, yeah. For me, season 2, I like season 1 a lot, actually.
Right.
I mean, I like episode 1 a lot of season 2. That's what I meant. Episode 2 is, I think, the worst one. Frog Lady and the Spiders, definitely the worst episode.
The only thing I remember liking about the episode was Grogu running for his life from the spiders, and I was like, "This is getting intense."
Yeah, so that was the worst one, I think.
I think season 2 built to a better conclusion than season 1. I felt like season 1 kind of arrived to its ending,
and there wasn't really that boss battle in season 1.
No, absolutely not. But season 1 definitely helped lead into season 2. It's one of those rare shows where if you combine seasons 1 and 2, that's one arc. That is one plot arc throughout both seasons.
Walking Dead kind of does that.
Walking Dead did that, I feel, for only a few seasons before just... I don't know. Yeah. Walking Dead is...
different podcast episode.
Yeah. After season 2, I'm definitely interested to see what season 3 will do. Book of Boba Fett looks... I'm interested. I'm not going to say I'm excited for it, but I watch it.
I think also what made me enjoy season 2 more was season 1 was very self-contained with just the Mandalorian characters. And season 2 started bringing in, Clone Wars characters that I had grown to love.
Right. Well, and also characters that not only you, but... people who had seen the original trilogy back.
When Boba came back, that was so cool.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. Like, and people were. I mean, I remember pre-release, people were thinking that that Disney was gonna bring him back.
Yeah, I mean, like they had that. They showed him at the end of episode 1, and everybody was like, "Is that all we're gonna get, or did they just want to do that just to say he's alive?"
And for me, that was absolutely what I thought they were just doing. Is that they were just gonna tease that, and then because nothing about episode 2 or 3 or 4 had to do with it, I just given up hope and just said, nope, they're not doing anything.
Like, all right, they admitted he's alive.
Right, and I think episode 6 came out, and I think that was when he finally came back, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I was like, damn. And then he put the armor back on, and I was like, oh yeah. And then, best moment of episode 7 was the seismic charge. That was like ASMR, bro. Boom. I was like, oh, they did it again.
How do you feel about the hyperspace jump in The Last Jedi?
So the hyperspace jump introduced falls under the category of a lot of stuff that is in the sequel trilogy of, wow, that was really cool and really awesome. Why didn't they do that before?
Well, and I think Ryan Skywalker kind of tried to play it off like, you don't do that. Like,
oh yeah, they were shitting on it for sure.
Because they were straight up just like, why don't we pull the Hondo maneuver? Yeah. And they're like, that's a once in a million chance.
Yeah,
like,
but I'm like, is it really? Like, just sacrifice.
I mean, again, if you're willing to sacrifice someone,
but you don't even have to. You can program droids to do that.
That's true.
So yeah, there's that, and then there's also everybody's like the healing thing with Rey, but then the counter argument that people produce is, oh, but it's in the sacred Jedi text that she read that the regular Jedi didn't have.
See, and that's a flaw because
I'm like, then how the hell does Grogu know how to do that? There's no chance he had the book.
See, and that
so it just creates
it's a realm that it creates a lot of plot holes, and maybe there's side effects or something that we don't know about yet, and maybe they'll introduce later. But you're right; it absolutely creates plot holes because, Qui-Gon was a master, and he was on the Jedi Council, so he should have known about this ability. Why didn't he just teach Obi-Wan to do it at the last second? Because obviously it's not that hard. Yeah. Because Grogu was able to do it.
Yeah, Obi-Wan res me, man.
So I mean, yeah, it creates issues. Going into trilogies, what's your favorite trilogy?
Not for the quality of films, but because it's definitely not the best in quality of the films, but I gotta go prequels just because I like that era of Star Wars so much. And with the knowledge I have from the Clone Wars and everything, how much supplementary content I have for that.
Okay, but we're just talking about trilogies. Okay, we're not talking about era, because then obviously...
Then I gotta go original trilogy.
Right, and I think I'm in the same boat, because Episode 1 and Episode 2 are pretty bad.
I don't understand how you can go original trilogy if we're talking about just trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite in the original trilogy, though?
I know it's not A New Hope.
Oh, not for me either.
Empire is cool, but I think I got a soft spot for Jedi.
I hear that argument a lot. For some, it's the Ewoks.
That's not why I like Jedi. No way. I just think I think the throne room and the culmination is cool. Jabba stuff's fun. Say what you want about Nub Nub. I think the new songs are way better.
In the special edition?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the best endings for a trilogy or even a movie ever.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I really like 6. 6 is for me it's really close to Empire, but I really, you rewatch Empire and you really start to appreciate what it did for filmmaking. It was a revolutionary step for being a second movie and still being so fresh that it was able to just pull those punch. It didn't just pull the punch. It delivered them. It hit you hard.
Yeah, and it just expanded the world so much. If you think about it, if you really think about it and just look at and watch Episode 4, there's no such thing as the Sith.
Right.
There's no such thing as all this extended mythos that we know about Star Wars and the Force is not in Episode 4.
Right, and so in Episode 4, it's the first one. For some, it's people's favorites. For me, it's not. It has elements I really like, but I worry when I show people Star Wars when I have to start them on because either way, I'm starting them on Episode 4. I'm starting them on Episode 1. On either one, they're weak points that I feel like you gotta be able to have to just sit down and be like, I promise it gets better.
Through this, yeah. I mean, just you're like, yo, just wear the 70s goggles.
So we talked about the original, the prequel trilogy. What is your favorite movie? Because I think we have the same answer.
It's got to be Revenge of the Sith.
Absolutely, Revenge of the Sith, just hands down. What was your favorite part of Revenge of the Sith, though?
There's some good parts of Revenge of the Sith. There's also some really terrible parts about Revenge of the Sith, but I mean, and part of me is like, look, when I think about Revenge of the Sith, like even if it's not good, it's just fun and just brings back some good stars. Like the opening's really cool.
The opening is amazing. Like, and the fact there's a cutout there that had that to be 2 hours is just like, wow.
Yeah. Really quick side note. Also, what they did with Rise of Skywalker that I didn't really like is they broke the formula, because Star Wars usually starts off with like a huge sequence.
Right.
Like there's Hoth, or there's Jabba, or there's this ship thing in Revenge of the Sith, and Rise of Skywalker is just like a bunch of scenes. It's like a montage of a bunch of scenes. Anyways, I really like the opening in Revenge of the Sith. I like Order 66, obviously. The Mustafar stuff is really awesome.
I think Mustafar is my favorite part of the movie. It really just, I mean, you
it's just the culmination of everything.
It's outstanding. I mean, HD cameras really started to come out around, I mean, George Lucas had his hand in creating them because he wanted them after he didn't like the CGI going into the film in episode 1, so he wanted to pretty much shoot it all digital so he could then add the CGI and it wouldn't have looked so different. And even putting episode 3 in a 4K player today, I mean, the film is absolutely beautiful, especially once you hit Mustafar. And so for me, like, Mustafar, when I think of episode 3, I just think of Anakin versus Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
It is such a good choreographed sequence. It is so fitting for the movie.
I still, to this day, go back and forth between that fight and episode 1 fight, which is a better one, to me.
For me, I think it is absolutely Anakin versus Obi-Wan.
Okay.
I think the stakes are much higher.
Okay, I'm gonna challenge you that because of what Dave said in the Mandalorian roundtable for episode 1. Episode 1, the duel is one of the most important moments of all of Star Wars. Okay, this is why.
Yeah, I heard.
You know why?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's really important that Qui-Gon dies. Because if Qui-Gon dies, that's where Darth Vader is born. Because Anakin no longer has a father figure.
Right.
And I think everybody overlooks that.
I mean, going to that roundtable discussion, it really highlighted how much Dave Filoni loves this universe and knows it. Like, he really knows this universe.
He's like George's protege.
Absolutely. And it, like, just hearing the way he talks about it, like, I'm just shocked he's not in charge of Lucasfilm and not in charge of everything, because he has a passion. He knows everything. I mean, he was there when George Lucas was there, so he got passed down everything, the way George thought about things, and it's just, it's crazy.
That's why I know, like, whenever, like, he's handling a project, I know it's in pretty good hands.
Right. Moving on to our last subject, Clone Wars.
Hold up. We didn't talk about best of the sequel trilogy. You were trying to avoid that.
Trying to avoid that. All right. So scratch going to theirs.
Best one's got to be Force Awakens, right?
Oh, let's just... So going into the sequel trilogy, what's your favorite?
It's got to be Force Awakens.
I mean, yeah, there's really not... I mean, I like Last Jedi, but I don't like it enough to say it's my favorite. So mine's also just...
Force Awakens has the only moment in all of Star Wars where I've ever dropped my jaw. In the theater.
Han?
No, when Kylo Ren freezes that laser, I lost my shit.
I was thinking of a whole entire different thing, but yes, I remember that at the beginning of the film where he stops in mid-shot. Yes,
that was so cool.
The one fun fact about The Force Awakens, when he goes to kill Han Solo, before he kills him, the light coming from above, half his face is blue and half it's red. And right before he goes in for the kill, the light goes out, and so his whole face is just red. I thought that's just a really cool...
That's some beautiful storytelling there.
Moving on to our last subject matter, because I can't discuss Rebels because I have never watched it. So our last subject is going to be about Clone Wars, which I have recently finished.
Rebels is worth the watch. Only one watch, though, I will say.
So what is your favorite season of Clone Wars?
Favorite? It's got to be either 4 or 5.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think mine was 5, but I remember there was that sequence in season 4 I really liked with the commander.
Yeah, okay, so, like, yeah, I'm with you here. So season 5 overall is a better season, but to me, season 4 has the best arc in the show.
Right, and I don't remember what the arc is called, but I really like the arc you're talking about.
The Umbara arc with the clones?
Yes.
It's the best Clone Wars.
Letdown, season 6. Season 6 was a letdown. Because you're going off of Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order at the end of season 5, and then season 6 just kind of ignores it.
I think...
And granted, it did not get full production. It had to just go with what was already in the works. So,
and it is... I have to just look at it for what it is, and it is called The Lost Missions, which it really isn't... Right. Like, it's not trying to be a whole season. It's trying to be, like, all this tacked-on extra stuff.
Right, and I understood that going in. It was really weird to watch. The last 4 episodes were my favorite, and they were the only episodes I thought were relevant. If I were to watch the season again, I would probably only watch those.
I mean, there's some redeeming stuff in the other ones. I think the first arc I think is pretty good with 5s and talking about Order 66.
Right, that one is. I didn't like the droid arc.
The droid arc.
And I don't remember if that was season 6.
No, I believe the one with Gregor.
Oh yeah,
that's in season 5.
That's in season 5. My bad. I didn't actually enjoy that sequence.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
The other part about season 6 I think is really good is the Clovis arc with Anakin. It just kind of gets you closer to that dark side Anakin.
Right, that's true.
And I think that's one of the greatest accomplishments of the Clone Wars in general, is just showing that transition better.
That's true. Season 7 was a weird spot for me. Like, I really enjoyed the Bad Batch getting introduced at the beginning of season 7.
It was fun. It wasn't the greatest, but it was fun.
Yeah, it was absolutely fun. And seeing a different type of clone was absolutely cool. The middle of season 7, for me, was its weakest point.
Absolute worst. I did the tier maker of all the arcs. It's in the bottom. F tier for sure.
I mean, I hated that at the end of every episode, they were back to where they started for, like, I think 2 whole episodes that happened.
I want to say it was the 3rd episode of the arc. Absolute waste of time.
Yeah, you start in the cell and you end in the cell, and it was just...
The only thing that accomplished was that the Mandalorians were looking at them, and you could have put that in any other episode.
And it's one of those sequences that if you had done over 2 episodes or 1, you would have gotten the same experience. And so it was too long.
Yeah.
The last 4 episodes, though, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, contender with the Umbara arc for best arc.
Oh, absolutely. And the only negative I would say about those last 4 episodes, episode 1 of that final arc does a really good job. Episode 2...
It does a really good job of setting the stage for Revenge of the Sith.
Right, and I really like the way that these episodes were divided up until the last 2 episodes. I definitely would have preferred to just have it be 1 episode, but an extended episode, because I felt like having that gap between the episodes...
It just cuts in such an awkward place.
And I get that the suspension's supposed to be high because...
Are they going to make it?
Right, but it's
Spoiler alert, if you watch Rebels,
yeah, if you watch Rebels, they make it. But for me, it was just like, you had such a fitting pre-finale that it was just...
Yeah.
And a lot of shows have this issue, and I've noted it for years, that Game of Thrones would always throw their biggest punches before the finale.
Yeah.
And a lot of shows do it. But when you're at the finale stage, it's like...
I think the reason why shows do that is because there's some movement in television to make your finale more of an epilogue and your episode before to be more like the climactic finale.
See, but we're getting into a phase where epilogues are borderline movies. Yeah. I mean, I know that you haven't seen the Snyder Cut, but the Snyder Cut's epilogue is a nice solid, I think, 20 to 30 minutes. And
you want to talk about epilogues? Let's talk about Return of the King.
And again, like when I think of an epilogue, I think of like Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 2's epilogue.
Yeah, you can
it's
just short and sweet.
To the point. And instead, these shows try and wrap things up pre-finale, and then they expect you to care what they're going to do in the finale. I think Game of Thrones really ran into this issue because it also pulled all of its punches before the finale, and the punches it tried to pull during the finale didn't work for me. But again, Game of Thrones is another episode.
Yeah. But so episode, what was it? 9? That was the first one of the arc?
Right.
Really good. Mm-hmm. I watched that like every day of that entire week until the next episode came out. And I loved how much it paralleled the movie.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I just thought it was such like that's what Star Wars does. It's like it's poetry. It's like it bookends really well.
And then episode 10 was really good because you really got to see
10 or 11 I think are the best ones.
10 was where Ahsoka and Maul are fighting.
Yeah.
And then episode 11 is Order 66 goes down, and that I love every single iteration they've shown of Order 66 because, including Bad Batch, we've seen it I think 5 times. Revenge of the Sith,
right?
Fallen Order,
Clone
Wars, Bad Batch. Okay, my bad. 4.
Yeah.
But every time I've seen it, it's just I really like seeing different takes on how it went down because it's such a big.
It's a huge tragic event, and it affects everybody differently.
I think also Star Wars lore needs to really start pulling it tight on what they're going to do with that reign because we're getting to a point where there were a lot of Jedi that survived, like a lot.
Yeah.
Like I felt like it was more impactful in 2005 because all we knew who survived was Obi-Wan and Yoda and technically Anakin. And that's it. And so...
And now we have Ahsoka's alive. We have Cal's alive. We have Ezra's alive. Am I missing anybody?
And I believe there's some more too.
Probably.
But
Grogu
technically
alive.
Yeah.
Unless he got murked by Kylo in the school shooting.
Yikes.
But
I really hope they never show that to us because that
or they get him out of there before then. What did you think of the episode, the Phantom Apprentice fight?
I really liked it. I felt like it felt like it could have gone any way, and it felt really impactful to storytelling.
Did you know they brought Ray Park to do mocap?
I did not.
Yeah, so Ray Park, the guy who played Maul in the
I know. Yeah, I know who he is.
They did the mocap for that fight, and then the girl who did the mocap for Ahsoka plays the armorer in Mandalorian.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's pretty cool.
So that's why like the fights feels a little bit more realistic and weighty. So I thought it was a really cool addition. And then like in the entire episode 11, you're like what's gonna happen, and there's just not a lot of people talking. It's just really eerie music, and you're like, I know it's coming.
You know what? Wrapping this whole thing up, that Order 66 scene really works because you pulled the music that was played in Revenge of the Sith. It was super faithful, and just having to see the way that Rex reacts to having that order. I mean, it's really
and just how he fights it. It was for
a
second.
I mean, it's just it's almost painful to see.
I'm glad they didn't have it where he completely just fought through it.
I felt like that would have been dumb. That he could have fought it on his own because of that
friendship. I can overcome over.
Because at that point, then any trooper could have done it, and I think that's the whole point: is that no one was able to fight it.
Yeah,
it was why it happened.
Yeah, but it was good that they got him back, and just seeing all of them on hunting mode for her, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So Clone Wars I think it's the best Star Wars show out there. I mean,
I'd argue that
out of animation.
Okay, out of animation so far, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And soon we're gonna have more competition for Mandalorian. I mean, we're gonna have Book of Boba Fett coming out.
Yep.
I'm excited for that.
I'm excited for Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan, I'm really excited for that. With Hayden coming back.
Right, yeah. That was the most shocking of the announcements.
And I've seen some set pictures. He's kind of growing his hair back, so I don't know if we're gonna get some
we're getting a
Clone
flashback?
Wars flashbacks.
Be cool.
They also announced Star Wars Visions, which is that anime animation thing.
And we have the Acolyte.
We have that. They announced a lot of stuff.
But I think Rangers I
think that got cut.
Right, Rangers got cut. So.
We got the Ahsoka show. I think that's going to basically pick up on what happened post Rebels.
Either that or it's going to pick up when we left her.
Right, but
because she did say she was going to go after Thrawn. So
and because she wants to find Ezra.
So
that's where it's going.
Yep, and I think that wraps our episode up.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us on this week's podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Timebreaker Podcast.
If you did enjoy it, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe and make sure to ring that notification bell for new episodes every Wednesday.
See you next week.